Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. I am Rishiv Kumar. I am working in Venture as a product manager, and I am based in Brisbane, Australia. I'm working with Venture from past 7 years. Here, I manage enterprise products such as Evolve Studio and Studio Manager. In this session, we'll be learning about creating Evolve forms. If you have any questions during the course of this session, please use the question section of the webinar. We will keep on answering your questions during the session. I have my colleague Jayashree with me today, who will be taking us through the session. Jayashree, will you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. Thanks for joining. My name is Jayashree. I'm a solutions engineer here based in the Chicago area. I've been with Wind Shuttle for about 3 years now, and I have experience working for SAP in the past as a developer and a consultant. Glad to be here. Thanks, Rishabh.
Okay, so let's begin. In this session, we'll cover when and why do we need evolve. So the evolve forms are needed when you have scenarios where several teams are involved in gathering the data before it makes its way into the destination system like SAP, Salesforce, or any other system of record. When we talk about all the then we'll talk about all the prerequisites that are required to create evolve forms, like which licenses, which permissions, or which user personas are required to create the forms. This will be followed by how to create evolve forms, how to create workflows, and also around these forms, some expert tips that can help you along the way. Okay. We have covered why, then now we'll cover when you need evolve. Okay. When the data supports critical business processes and it needs to go through a complex process of workflows, the destination system may get incorrect or wrong data. And it can have costly consequences. For example, shipment reaching to a wrong address, or choosing wrong color or size of a particular product, etc. So these incorrect data can have very severe consequences in some cases. And sometimes it takes too long to create or change the data. Often the data comes from different teams and different stakeholders, and all these people work at their own pace. And adding several teams and several approval processes make data collection a very complicated and time-consuming process. Evolve helps to streamline the workflows, send timely reminder to people to complete their tasks, and we can set due dates for each of these tasks as well. All this happens in faster completion of the process. Okay. The data usually does not relate to a single object. For creation of a material, we may need data from several different plants, and we may have to create tens of hundreds of materials or bills of materials or change requests to the pricing of different products. All the high volumes of data create a change request and can be handled very easily through Evolve. We can segregate various solutions or processes across different apps and libraries. Okay. Now consider a business has multiple business units across different geographies. So all these different scenarios and complexities of data varies across business units and geographies. The process may need to be audited by internal or external auditors. It may be compliant. It may need to be compliant with some data privacy or protection acts. All of this is handled very easily with Evolve with the help of a very modern and easy to use user interface. Okay. With Evolve platform, you can automate different strategic data processes that can span across any business process across your SAP landscape. So these landscapes can include material management, product launches, plant maintenance, customer onboarding, vendor onboarding, and finance and accounting and data processes as well. Okay. So Evolve offers us some different front-end tools, and these can be selected based on the use case and volume of data. So if you have one or a few records to work upon, then standard web forms is the best option. For medium volume, that includes tens of records, use forms with smart tables. So these are the forms, but the data is represented in the form of smart tables. And if you have hundreds or thousands of records to process, then Excel workflows are the best option. So in this session, we'll be talking about web forms and workflows, and Jayashree will be taking us over the session. Over to you, Jayashree.
Thank you, Rishabh. So we'll spend most of our time trying to build a workflow solution from scratch. I picked a materials use case as an example, and there's a good chance we'll go over time. There's a lot to cover. So if you're able to hang on, please do. But if not, come back for the recording. What I'll also include at the very end is the actual solution file that I'm going to be building as a downloadable to take with you. So you can have that as a reference. We'll post it on the community as well as a sample or a starting point. All right, so let's jump in. From a prerequisite standpoint, we need a few things, right? In terms of access, we need to make sure that you have the Studio Developer license assigned to you in Evolve. You also need the app level permission or the role of a solution developer within the app. So I'll show you where those things are in Evolve. And you need 20.x version of Studio on your VM or desktop so you can test the scripts and map them to XML and bring them in as web services. From a use case standpoint, yes, we need to have already built the Studio scripts associated with that flow. So perhaps the process is that you'll sit down with your business user, try to identify what objects we're changing, and identify which fields must be included in those scripts, and try to have your scripts ready before you start the actual build. We also need to have a process flow kind of figured out a little bit. Maybe it's a scratch diagram at the beginning, but as you go, you can refine by asking some key questions. So I put together a sample list of questions you can ask your stakeholders, and I've grouped them into sort of 3 buckets, really. So the first thing is we can ask them process-related questions, right? So things like, what is the current process? Is it manual? Is it email-based? How are we gathering data today? What is the main goal for even creating this solution? Is it to improve speed? Is it to digitize or automate something? Is it to improve data quality by adding rules and validating them up front? Is it to improve auditability and visibility in the system, or just to provide a better user experience compared to entering stuff in SAP? We also should ask them if the process somehow varies based on some type of variable. It could be if it's a different object type or a region, is the process different, right? And that tells you sort of how many subflows you need to plan for, or how do you branch out the workflow into various flows like this. And I think what we all like to do is figure out the happy path, which is great, but you should also think about what should happen if something is wrong with the data. What is the rejection path? Does it go back to the requester, or does it go back to someone in master data to review? So which teams will go back and forth and try to work the data out is also important as you try to work through the workflow itself. Then we can ask people-related questions, right? So let's look at some examples here. We can ask, okay, which groups are involved? How are we going to assign participants to these tasks? So what is the logic for coming up with, hey, this person should get the task, or this team should get this task, right? So is there a matrix behind the scenes that guides you and leads you to that user? Or is it a group that has been set up in Evolve that should get it? So there's various ways of resolving participants, and that's an important piece of designing the workflow itself. You also need to ask about which roles need to read or write data to SAP versus which roles are just simply approving it, right? And they could have different views. You may switch on email approvals in some cases where they don't need to act or contribute data. They can get an email and hit approve, and that'll be a simpler way of engaging that type of audience. You can ask about what notifications should happen at what points in the process. Are there any tracking or reporting requirements? And how will we handle if someone is out of office? What are some processes we'll put in place to handle that? There's something in the system already where you can set up out of office delegation as a user for yourself and designate someone else to get a task on your behalf when you're away. So think through those types of day-to-day things that will eventually happen as you roll out the workflow across the organization. Now, let's also look at what data-related questions we can ask. You want to plan for, yes, what are the objects that are being created or changed, and this will tell you which T codes you want to script for and which fields to include. Another important thing is how many records must be processed in one request, right? And as Rishav was saying, there's different front-end options in Evolve, and if it's one or a few items in each request, then a standard web form works well. You do have the option to do a smart table, which is kind of like the best of both web form and Excel. It'll give you a lot of flexibility, but it performs well when it's in the tens, right? The records, you can't have hundreds in there. So that this question will kind of lead you down a path for choosing which UI works. And also think through in that workflow whether the data will be posted at the very end or in stages. For example, when you're setting up a material, you may have very limited data up front, so you may post the basic data views first. Then you may go to other teams to gather more details from, let's say, MRP or accounting. And as more data is available, do you want that also to be posted to SAP as it gets validated? Or do you want to wait till the very end and post after approving everything in one shot? So these are some decisions you have to make up front in order to maximize how much time, how you design for your solution. Then there's a lot of data quality questions we can ask. We can ask what data validations need to happen over and above what's already in SAP. Are the users providing all the fields, or can we derive some to make it easy on them? And if we are deriving, how, based on what, right? What are those rules or matrices that we need to have in the backend that'll tell us the default values for a lot of these fields? And lastly, again, this is just a sample. There could be several more questions, but it's also helpful to ask if any non-SAP systems are involved. Of course, you can use Evolve for things outside of SAP. We've supported SOAP web services in the past as well. We're adding support for REST APIs in version 20.2, which is coming in a week or so. So there are options to include non-SAP systems as well as maybe people. There can be tasks that happen in a system that you don't directly integrate with, but you can include those people in the workflow just to make sure that they are notified at the right point in the process when it's their turn to go complete something in a third-party system. They can come back and mark it off as checked, and then we can proceed with the workflow. So there can be ways to ensure that the end-to-end process is fully complete, whether it's in SAP or outside of it. All right, so those are some high-level questions. Hopefully that gives you an idea of how to plan for your workflow and how to think about this in a broader way. So for our example today, I thought we will try to get through as much as we can of this workflow. So we'll have 4 personas participating. This is a material request workflow, so we'll have a requester. We will give them a starting point, a web form where they can copy from a reference material. We'll force them to validate and they can submit that request. And this will launch off 2 parallel tasks. One to collect MRP data from someone in plant ops, one in finance to provide accounting data. And then when both of those are finished, we'll send it to the data steward to approve and post to SAP. At the end, we can have some notifications as needed, and we can end the process. So it looks simple, but it's going to take us all of our time and maybe more to get through this. So let's get started. Okay, so hopefully you all can see my screen. That's Evolve. I am on platform. All of our development will happen from here using the browser. So I'll show you where to verify if you have the right permissions. So up here, when you click on your name, you can come here to see and check that you have a Studio Developer license. You can also come here to check your roles. So within the app that I'm trying to develop, which is this one here, I'll drop down and make sure that under the Forms library, I have the right permission of a solution developer. Okay, let me also show you my scripts, which was the third item in my prerequisites. So I've already prepared 3 scripts, which we will use through this process. My first one is the MMO1 all. And if you've used Studio mainly with Excel, this view looks a little bit different. Let me just pop over here and show you how I got there. So this is a classic MMO1 script. It has got all the fields you would expect, right? MRP, accounting, and there can be several more depending on your use case. And what I've done is mapped it to an XML format here. So instead of Excel, we're just switching it to XML. This essentially allows us to use this script now as a web service in our form. So what I want to have done by this point before I go to the form development is have my script, test it, make sure it's working. So I've provided some test data. As you can see, it runs successfully. It creates a material in SAP. So if we are not fully sure about this, we have no business going ahead of this step here, right? So make sure your scripts are working as best as you can anyway. There's room to come back here, add fields, take away, and re-import and update your script later on. But that can get a little complex if you're just starting out. I'll show you the other scripts I have. So remember, we want to allow our originator to copy from a reference material. So I have a read script. This is also a transaction script. We'll give it the reference number, a plant, and we are pulling down or downloading all these attributes from SAP. I could have used a query script as well. It's a choice. In this case, I'm just going with a transaction script and downloading those fields. And again, I've tested it. I make sure it's working. And you'll see when it's successful, it gives back this message that no message is returned. So we'll kind of make a note of that. The last one I have is a smaller snippet recording. And this is to allow the requester to validate just the basic data, right? So if we go back to our flow here, okay, let me pull this one up. Okay, so they are providing the basic information and they should validate that portion, right? And then it'll go to these other teams. So in order to allow for that, I have a smaller snippet recording, which is here. So this is just a couple first views, right? The basic data 1 and 2. And at the end of this script, we have, when you get that pop-up to say whether you want to save or not, we've selected no. So we are not saving. So this is a perfect validation script. What it'll do is it'll tell us if there's problems or errors with the data, but it will not actually save anything. See that as an example, we can test and make sure that it's doing that. So those are my scripts. We will import these into the solution and start building our way to the workflow. So let's go back to Evolve. There we are. So where we'll start is, let me switch off the webcam to give us more space. Hopefully you can see everything. Okay. So where we'll start is in this section here. So under solutions, we'll go to forms and we'll start adding a new solution. Okay, so when you come into this canvas, it looks like there's a lot of things here. Of course, we won't go through every one of them. I'll show you what we need for this build, given the time we have. So in this section here, we can start by importing several different things, right? We can bring in transaction scripts, which we'll do now, any queries or web services, data connections, and so on. So let's start by importing our scripts. So once we come here, these are my 3 scripts, and the order of importing matters. If you want to keep your fields looking clean and organized, and have it be as straightforward as possible. So one tip I want to give you is try to import the script that is the superset of your options, right? So in my case, the MMO1 is the script, the final creation one, which has most number of fields, everything I need. The basic data is obviously a subset, and the read is also a subset because it's not giving me a few things like description and so on, because I want the user to provide them instead of copying from reference. So in my case, it makes sense to bring this guy in first. So that way I have created the group once, and each time I import these 2 ones, I'll just reuse the same group to kind of keep everything contained. If you are having, let's say, a round trip scenario where you query something and update, I would recommend going for the update one first as a tip. So all right, we'll bring the MMO one first. So we've chosen the script. We'll go here. We will provide a name to it. We'll use the group name. And in here, I will not select this option here, the generate repeating section. What this will do is it will create a tabular or a repeating structure in your web service. So you can call this to create multiple materials with the same shot, right? You can have either a single or a bulk upload option. But in my case, I want to keep this simple for now. So I'll just create one material with this request. So we'll uncheck that. In this spot here, I'll leave the name alone. The default is fine. And I will select my SAP system that I want to validate and test against. So we'll go next. So this bit takes some getting used to, so I'll try to walk you through what's happening here. So this is the mapper. So on the left, you see the fields that the web service is exposing, which is our script. And these are all the form fields it's proposing that it will create. I know that these are new and they don't exist yet, right? And you can also tell by looking at the asterisk here. So anytime there's the asterisk, that means it's a proposal for a new field. In this case, because I have nothing on my form, I'm just going to go ahead and accept this. This all looks good. So as you'll see, it has plopped in all those fields and segregated them, whether they're input or output fields. So we'll go and import the others as well in the same shot. So now I'm going to go with the read. And we will say, this is to read my reference material. And in here, when I come in, I want to reuse the same group. You can always type in a new group, but that kind of makes it clunky, and I'll have to, mess with bindings and everything else. So I'm just going to reuse that. So the idea here is that the user will query for a reference material. They will be presented some values as options, and we will just use either update or use the same values to create the new material. So I want everything to be in the same fields, right? So I'll use the same group. And we will specify the connection. Okay, in here, because I don't want to recreate anything, although it's proposing all this stuff with the _1 and the asterisk, I want to not have that. So I'll say use existing input and output fields, right? Much of this is just fine, except for a few exceptions here. So my material number is actually a reference material number, right? Not the one I want to create. So I want to make sure that I tell it to create something else so I can rename it and use that. Same for log field. I like my logs separate. If I'm having multiple web services, I like to rename each log field to reflect what it represents. So that way we can kind of keep them organized and nice. Everything else looks good to me. I can accept it as it is. So you'll see in my fields here, we'll drop this down. I have this extra one, which I wanted it to create. I'm going to rename this guy to say reference material number. And I'm going to rename this one here to say log field for read reference material number. So this is the message that will come back from SAP when I read. So I want to keep it separate from the create one. All right, one last guy to import, and then we'll be on our way to doing more with the form. So basic data. We want to validate. And we'll use the connection. We'll use existing input and output fields. In this case, the only thing I want to create new is the log. Everything else represents the material I'm trying to create, so the mapping is fine. And we'll rename this guy here. Okay, so we have all of our fields and all 3 of our transaction scripts imported as web services. Now, let's go back to our deck here and look through the order of operations. And this is just meant to be as a guide. Obviously, different people have different preferences, but just as some good ideas to adopt as you're developing. The first thing we need to do is create and test XML scripts in Studio. We did that. We made sure they are working. Then we created the solution in Evolve. We imported our scripts. We checked field mapping. The next thing we'll do is create what's called a developer view. And it's important to mention here that for as long as possible, we will stay in the developer view and work everything we need to do in that view and make sure it works there first, right? So all our web services, all our rules, lookups, everything else I want to do about those fields, I want to make sure that the developer view works first before I branch out to create anything else. So if we work through this, this will be our full flow, right? We will create web services, test our scripts first from the form, make sure they're working. Then we'll go add lots of different stuff here. So name, template, rules, lookups, whatever else you want to do. Make sure it all works here before you jump in to add the workflow and resolve participants and add form views. There should be one more bullet here. So the form views, it's here, is the last thing we will do. And we'll do the end-to-end test after that, right? So once you start adding form views, what will happen is for every change you make, you'll start getting a pop-up and it will say, hey, do you want to make this change to all views or just one view? And it can get very cumbersome to work through that. So my suggestion would be to do this at the very end. First, to work out everything else you need, make sure the workflow transitions correctly, it's able to resolve participants and everything else, and then branch out and do the form view. Okay, back to our form here. So far, we have nothing in these sections, right? So we'll build out the developer view. So I'm going to start by creating some groups to group my data here. Let's say we will have a section for request data, right? The request ID, number, who is the requester, what's the date, that kind of information, which we can maybe report on later on. I'm going to group my different sections of data. And we can have one little section for the final data steward, right? Now let's take our fields and plop them in the right place. So I have, as you can see, I'm selecting what would be part of my basic data. I'm also including plant because it helps me read the reference material. So that's in the basic data section here. We'll click out of there. We'll carry on with the MRP. We'll clean up the views in just a second. I know it doesn't look great right now. So all the way up to here is everything that MRP will provide. So I want to put that into a nice group for them. Okay, it did that. And everything from here on out is stuff accounting will provide. Okay, so we'll clean this up just a bit. So I'm going to select the group here, go to properties and do a few things with how this looks. So I've selected, I want 5 columns. I'll do that for everyone. Okay, and let's see. Let's add some things here into this request. So I don't have any SAP fields for that. So there can be fields that have nothing to do with SAP, but you want to collect them as part of the form and track them and evolve. And this is just one of those examples where I'm going to say, I will have a separate little section. We will add request ID. And maybe requester name. And we'll add a request date. So this is a date field. Okay. And these 3 guys over here can be part of this request metadata section. Go back to the group, make it look nice. And of course, with every field here or at the group level, you can set up whether something is read-only or required or not. So all of these attributes, there's several here to control, but I'm just using the more popular ones that are more useful. So here we are. We'll do a few things here to set these by default every time a new request is created. So we'll work through that. Let's build out a little bit more of the basic data section here, right? So what I want to have happen is first the guy, the requester, a guy or a girl, gets to search for a reference material in order to start the data entry process, right? So we have the reference material number somewhere here, which we can bring into our view. We have some logs. So as we are searching or validating, we want to have those logs available here as well. And we'll organize everything so it starts to make sense in just a bit. I want to give them some buttons, one for reading the reference and one for validating basic data. So let's organize this a little bit. So I need my reference material number, material type, in order to, and the plant to come up with the data that we will copy. Okay, so we'll plop this here. Not there. Let's go over here. Let me add a spacer so it makes it a little more meaningful. I'm telling the spacer needs to be a little bit longer. And again, you can use the buttons here or drag, drop, whatever is convenient. I tend to do both interchangeably a lot. I'll go up and I'll make this look like that. Okay. I'll make this one a little bit bigger. Make this read only. You'll notice I'm clicking into two separate things, right? And that's another thing. If you're a new developer, it can get confusing. This is the actual field where you can see it's a specific data type, there's a binding, there's attributes, whether something is read-only, what's the length of it, what rules are associated, right? So the field itself is this, what I've selected now. But there's also a separate thing for the label, right? The label drives what's the column span, whether a sub-label exists. If you want to add a tooltip to like help the user with a little pop-up, you can add that. So depending on what you're doing, you have to click in the right place in order to get there. Okay, so I want this log to be read-only because this is the message coming back from SAP. We want to show it to the user and not mess with it. So let's play this out. They will open the form. They'll provide a plant, perhaps. We can set up some defaults to make this easy for testing. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And they'll pick a material type. Based on the material type, I want to offer an option for them to pick the right type of reference material number. And then once they pick those two, they'll click a button to read data from SAP corresponding to that reference material. And all that data will be represented in the fields below, the output from SAP, right? Okay, so in the material type, I want to make this a drop-down. There can be two materials, two types they can create. So this is one way of setting some drop-down values. You can do them manually. In this case, I'm going to say, this is the label that they will see, which is different from what's passed to SAP, which is the value here. So I'm setting that up. And my second one will be, let's say, semi-finished. And again, this is just an example. In your scenario, it may make more sense to separate these out, do one solution for FERT because maybe the fields and the flow is very different from semi-finished or raw materials, right? So this is one way of setting up drop-down values. I'll show you the second one in this next field here. So based on whether they choose FERT or HALB, I want them to have different options for reference material number. So for that, I have prepared what's called a reference data list. So you can create them either from Excel or directly. I'm going to show you what my list looks like. So it tells me if this is the material type, these are your reference options. If this is it, and something else, right? So we'll try to use this reference list as a data connection in our solution and use that to make our lookup. So let's go back in the solution. So this is where we can add big ticket items like data connections here. So reference materials maybe. And we'll say what type of a list it is. So you can have lists that come from a SQL server or any of these other options, right? I'm going to choose reference data because that's where my list is within Evolve. And it'll show me all the options that are available. So it'll show me everything that's in my app, as well as any global lists that I can choose from. So I'll choose my list here, bring it in. These were the two columns. So that looks good. Now, once it is available here, I can go back in the form. I can add that to surface this drop down that I want. So what we're setting up here is sometimes also called cascading dropdown, because we want this value to be dependent on what the selection was here. So we'll set that up. So we'll say get it from the data connection instead of manual. We'll say this is my connection name. Show me the label as well as the value. In this case, I don't have a separate description field, so I'm just going to use the same. And I'll set up a filter. The filter reads that material type should match the type provided by the user. Okay. As much as possible, you want to use the default buttons and options presented. I find that it's easier instead of typing. Sometimes the syntax is off and you'll run into trouble. So that's another tip. When you use formulas or filters or any of this, try to use out-of-the-box buttons that will populate these for you. Okay, so our filter says, show me only values available that correspond to my material type. So we'll test this out and make sure it works. Now let's think about this button. This button is for reading reference data. So again, it's easier to change the label. It'll automatically name the field. So I always want to do this. And your label can have spaces, but your fields must be continuous names. So you have to either put an underscore or something else. So the idea is that they will pick it and everything will plop here. And this will be for validate basic data. Okay. Let's make this log field read only as well. And make this 2 columns long and push it down so it kind of makes a little bit more sense. Okay. So again, you can spend a lot of time here trying to make this look pretty, use the color options. There's also an option to bring in your own styling and colors much easier by using the CSS file. So you can include that here, and that way you can have your own branding and colors much easier than trying to manipulate each field here. So that's another tip, and sometimes we use that a lot to show like custom scenarios and demos. Okay, so far so good. I think we should start trying to test these changes that we've already made. So in order to do that, I need to associate these buttons with the actual scripts themselves, right? So I have a button, it's doing nothing right now. I need it to call my script. For that, I will create what's called a web service control. And I need 3 for my 3 web services. So I'll add them all now. So this one will be for read reference data, and I will choose the script that's going to read that reference material for me. And you can invoke web services several different ways. You can have it based off of a rule on a field. You can have a button trigger it, which is what we will choose now. You can have it as you tab out of a field. Maybe someone chose a material, you want to show them a description by bringing it back from SAP. So you can have a little snippet web service and have it called that way. You can have things called on form loads, so that way you're showing something to the user already. So there's several different ways, and we're just going to go with the simple one here. We'll use a button to call our web service. So same thing we will do for the validate basic data as well. Okay, let's put a third button in before we do this last one. And that button will be only available to my data steward, right? So I want to put it in that view. So here we go. The data steward, we didn't build this out, so let's go ahead and do that. They will create the material, get the final log, and let's also give them the option to validate. So we'll give them that. Okay, so in this last view here, when we've gathered all the data, this button will be used to finally create or validate the material. So we'll rename this. Log field, and I'll leave these as is, they look fine. Okay, so back to our web service that we were trying to work with here. We'll call it web service for create. We'll pick the script that'll run, and it'll be invoked by the button at the very end. Okay, so what we've done so far is we've brought in our scripts, we've done some mapping, we've done a little bit of lookups and drop downs, try to help the user a bit. We've given them buttons to read reference data, they can validate basic data, they can also try to create the material at the very end. So for now, let's pause. Let's try to make sure we can test this and it's working so far. Another tip is as you're developing, try to test after each change, test, make sure it works. So when something breaks, you can easily go back to the previous version and try that step again. Right now, I didn't exactly do what the best practice is. I did a lot of changes. So I would recommend that as when you're new, especially, just test several times what you're building out. So here's our form. It has opened up. There's nothing here. We will set those defaults when we go back to our developer view here. Let's test if this dropdown works. So we said for FERT, I want to show some things. For HELB, I want to show something else, right? So this is working. So this is one way to guide your user to values that are actually meaningful. Again, SAP may have several options, but you as a business rule may want to enforce something. So this is a great way to guide the user to pick the right value. So once we have detail about the reference material, I'm going to read from SAP. So it's working as expected, right? We read from SAP. There was a log that came back. It gave us all of these values. So now let's try to validate basic data. It's not going to work because we're missing the description. So let's go back and make this mandatory so that way we will force the user to enter it. So let's put in a description and validate one more time. Okay, that means it's successful. Let's try an error. All right, that's working. So far, the user can do all of these things. Let's just make sure the create works as well with the default data that we do have. So let's see if that checks out. All right, it did work. So good news. We can very quickly go and check our material if it looks okay in SAP. Okay. So it is there. It has the description, all these fields that we provided so far. So looking good. Let's go back to our steps here. So we've gotten this far. We've tested everything. We're making sure the scripts are working as it is in the developer view. Now we'll go and add a few things. We've already added the data connection, so we'll build on this part here. Okay, so back to Evolve. So let me close out all this. We'll keep our developer form view open. Okay, I want to do a few little tweaks here. I want to make this description, first of all, required. I want to make sure it's only 40 characters. And say I want to apply a rule to make everything consistent. I want to make sure that the description entered by the user is automatically capitalized as well as we remove extra spaces. So we just made up a rule. I'm going to show you how to accomplish that. So I'll say auto cap and normalize spaces. You can have several types of rules. And again, this can be a whole session in itself, working through all of these types and giving you examples. So I'm just going to give you a very high level primer on this. So you can have validation rules, which will ensure that before you can proceed out of the form, those things have to be met. You can format based on something happening. So if it's a wrong value, you check something and you change the color of that to a red or highlight it somehow for the user. You can have action rules, which is what we will use now because we want to perform an action. We want to apply some functions to our description in order to capitalize it and take away spaces. You can also have custom JavaScript rules. So I'll pick action. And the condition here specifies when this action should occur. You can come here and have very specific criteria for this to happen. In my case, I want this to happen every time there is a change in that field. So even if I have entered it once, I go back and change that field, I want the rule to apply. So I'll leave it as it is, and I will add the action itself right now. There can be several different things you can do. I am just going to set a field value. This is what I want to do. You can obviously look through these options and try them out. So what is the field I want to set? I want to set the description with what? The value of it. So I'm going to click into here. And again, this is another one of those tips. Don't just start typing here because there's a good chance the syntax will be wrong. So use the functions or variables as much as possible. So I'm going to say insert function. There is a function to normalize spaces, which it will take away extra spaces. And there is also a function to convert something to uppercase. So we'll use both. And the order really doesn't matter. I will choose my functions here. So it's going to apply those two to some text. And what is this text? I want to fill it up with my actual description that the user provided. So it's not a variable, it's a field value. And we'll choose that text. So it'll take the value provided by the user, apply the function to convert that to uppercase, as well as take away spaces, and put this in the same field back again. So it's going to apply the change onto itself. Okay, so that's one example. Let's do one or two more things before we move on. Let's say we want to add a lookup to help with the user select the right product hierarchy, right? So I want to add something that talks to SAP directly. Now you can have several different types of lookups. This is a generic lookup. You can have a SQL table or some other data connection and have that surface the values to the user using a pop-up, right? If it's an SAP lookup, we want to use this one. So I will bring that into my group. So let's go configure this guy here. So lookups also use web services to bring back values, and luckily we have those ones here. I can choose either this one here or the basic data one. Both of them have product hierarchy in there for me. These are all the available these are all the available fields that I can pick from. So I know I'm choosing that one. And so far, we have not told it which field it corresponds to. And this is that last setting. I have to make sure that the image of this lookup is associated with the field here. So it'll go sit right next to the hierarchy. So when we go back, we'll test this. Let's add a few things to make sure these numbers will come by default. So every time a new request is created, I want there to be a number associated with that request, and it should increment automatically, right? So for that, I'll create first what's called a name template. So I'll go to the solution and add that. So we'll say request number. Okay, so this gives me this numeric type of number range sort of thing, which increments as we have more requests come through. I'm going to prefix this with a constant. So it'll look like this, dash and the number itself. So each request will generate a new number. So I have that name template. I may have other global name templates, which I can also use. This is just at this solution level. So let's go back here. Now I have to associate that name template that we just have to this request ID field, right? So to do that, I will make use of another control here called the form name. So we'll say, okay, please add this name template to this field. So it'll be the request ID. Okay, so this will run at the start every time, and you can have other settings here, which I'm not going to use now, but for now, this will plop in the request ID with that dash and the number. So we're good for that one. Let's set the value for the requester name. So again, I can set up a default value. Here again, I have several variables available in the solution at runtime, and I can use them and show them to the user. So I'll use the current display name, and you'll see the refresh default value is turned to false. That means it'll get set and stay that way. The request date, again, we can set up a default value for today. Same thing, I want to insert a function instead of typing today, just to be safe. And that's it. So that looks good. So the next time we test it, we should see some values up in this section. We should see some of these rules working, which we just added, and this lookup. So I think it looks good so far. We'll go ahead and deploy this. While it's doing that, let me quickly also show you how you can revert back something if stuff doesn't work or things are going wrong. No, I want to go here first. Okay, so within the form, this is our solution that we're working through. So you'll see you have a version history, and these are the two versions I deployed. For some reason, if I've deployed this and it's not doing what I needed to do, I can go back, select this one, and deploy this to bring it back to an old state. So this is another tip for developers as you are doing. Make sure you have, several. Make sure you test several times. So deploy, test. So that way you can switch back your most recent changes if they're not working. Okay, so this is our form, which we just launched as a result of that second deployment. So you'll see I have the metadata populating correctly. I have, again, all of this stuff, which was working before. Let's make sure it's still the case. Now I will add a description. So I'm going to add some dummy spaces, and I'm trying to type, but it's not letting me go beyond my 40 characters. So that's working. I'll tab out of this. You'll see it has automatically capitalized, and I have gained a little more space to type from those extra spaces. So this rule is working. That's great. We can validate. Let's check the product hierarchy. So this is calling SAP to bring back this description. Let me make it a little more generic. So let's say, show me everything that starts with 005. It's going to go to SAP, read down all these hierarchy values. So it's showing the top level and then anything underneath that, so I can pick accordingly. So let's take that one. We'll validate. And again, if you want to help the user a little bit more and have some more clarity around this log, when you see this message, you can switch it to say success instead. So that way you'll know that the validation was successful. So you can have a rule on the log field that says, if the log field is this, then show success instead. Okay, so everything is still working. We've created one more material. We can save and route. Now let's go back and make sure to check in where we are. It is 10 o'clock. I know some of you may have to leave. If you're able to hang on, please stay so that you can see this little last bit in action as well. Or come back for the recording, whatever works for you. Thanks for your time today. So we've come this far. We'll go ahead, add the workflow, and then we'll also create some quick form views. So going back to our solution. Okay, so our workflow, if you recall, had 2 parallel tasks. And just to keep this simple in terms of resolving participants, especially for testing, I'm going to set it to myself. There's many different ways of resolving participants. And I know this can be a whole session in itself. For now, I'm just going to choose myself and test if everything works. So I'm going to call this swim lane MRP or plant ops, either one. I'm going to call this one finance. And we'll have one for master data. Okay, so this is a default swim lane that comes every time. You can move it to the bottom or stick any technical things to happen in this. So let's go ahead, add some tasks for these people. And there can be a lot of logic built in, whether if you want to reject something and have it loop until we reach a certain condition in the workflow before going ahead. There's many different things you can do. There's what's called a loop block, which is like a wizard, which allows you to create loops easily without having to do all the transitions yourself. For now, because we are so out of time, I'm going to choose the simpler workflow. So I'll choose 2 activities for these 2 guys here. They will happen in parallel, and we will wait for them to finish, and we will have the master data person approve. So let me connect everything here. Okay. And at this node here, there can be 2 possible paths, right? What happens if it's approved and what happens if it's rejected? So in my case, again, I'm going with the simple flow here. I'm going to say, if I reject this, I just want to tell the originator, hey, sorry, bad request or whatever. And if I approve it, that's the end of my process. So here, I can say what this transition is. So I'm saying, go here if it's approved, and we will say this is the end state. Go here if it's rejected, and this is a rejected state. In this notification here, there is a default email template that goes out, but you can certainly customize and put whatever message you want and include fields from the form, show them what they need to see and everything else. So all that's good. Here, this activity will be called MRP data collection. This will be called accounting. So after the requester starts this off, it'll go off to these 2 people in parallel when they finish, so that we have to wait for both of them to finish, and that's why there's this end element here. After that point, it'll go for an approval, which also includes posting. So I'm just going to call it approve and post. And good so far. So you'll see right now, we haven't created role specific views just yet. I want to make sure that my workflow works just as it is, that it is able to find all these transitions, if there's any conditional stuff here, that it's doing all that, and test it out before we do that, right? So let's go deploy. And sometimes it will say no default view set. So in that case, you can go and set the view. So let's pretend we did all this. Just run it real quick. Validate. Okay, description. And our originator is not supposed to create, so we won't click anything just yet. We'll break these views up to reflect what they will actually see by creating the form views. Right now, we are only testing if the workflow is working. So I'll just go ahead, and what we should see is in our under our solution 2 tasks for our test here. So that means it is flowing as we told it to. It's showing me a task for MRP data. So let's say I gave MRP information, change something here. Continue. We can finish the accounting task, and in their view, they will see only this section here. We'll clean this up to show them the right view. But let's say they gave us a new price, and continue. And now it's going to go to the master data person to look at all new information. So now they're seeing the updated price, the updated MRP controller, and the full view of what the requester provided. And again, each of these views can have display only, read only, editable, mandatory fields. So there can be several more things we can do to make this a proper flow. But for now, let's pretend data steward is happy with what they see. They should be able to create the material, which we know works. They should be able to approve or reject. So let's test the happy path. So again, you may say they should not be able to approve without creating the material, so we can build in rules to enforce that in the workflow, right? So there's many things we still can do. So when the process has finished, what we should see is an instance of that process here, which is now complete. We can see process history, which shows exactly how it happened, right? Who did what and so on. So the workflow is working. So let's go back and I'll show you how to put together the views. Back to here. So the easiest way to create form views is to duplicate what you already have and modify and take away what you don't need. So our developer view will keep this sort of sacrosanct. That's usually what our team recommends. As I was learning this, it's always a good practice to test everything in one view and then keep that as separate from the other ones. So I'll call that developer view. This one will be my requester view. And I'll set this to this specific view type. So these are standard out of the box. So when you start the request, it'll always call the originator view. So my label can be different, but I want to make sure I set this. This view is the MRP view. And there'll be one for accounting similarly, and the last one for data steward. Accounting view. And data steward. Okay, so in the requester view, I want to show just that first section. So we will take this away. And this is that pop-up I was talking about. Let me show it to you one more time. So when you have more than one view in the solution, it's always going to ask this. And if you have rules and everything else you're working through, this can get very annoying. So make sure your developer view is fully working before you come here and do the role-specific views at the very end. So this guy over here, so this is a requester view. They will see just those two sections and they'll be able to route the form. Our MRP person will see basic data, but in a read-only manner. So let's make sure that's the case. And they will see MRP section, which they can change. They don't need to see accounting. We'll take it out. And they don't need to see this one. Right, so far so good. And again, we can clean this up. We don't have time for that. I'll take out these buttons typically because they can't click them anyway, right? But we leave it like that for now, just to show you something that's working at the end of this. They should not see this one. They should see accounting. They should not see this one. And I'm going to leave the data steward view as it is, the same as the developer view. They should be able to do everything just for now. One last thing we need to do is, now that we have these views, we have to associate them to different tasks in the workflow. Because we didn't have that before, it was always showing everybody the default view. All I'll do now is to say which form view to use. So your MRP person will see the MRP view. Accounting person will see that. Where's the form view? There we go. Okay, we have set up everything. I hope I haven't missed anything. Let's go check it out. Okay, let me set up the requester view as the default view. Okay, this is looking as expected. So let's say the person starts the request. They'll choose something, they'll read. They will provide the description here. They will validate that. And again, you can force them to validate before being able to save and route. We can build in some logic to do that. Right now, it's not doing that. So I can potentially not do anything and just say save and route, which isn't a great thing. Also, there's ways to add custom buttons here. These are by default. You won't see them when we are developing the form, right? At the bottom here, you don't see save and route and anything else. So these buttons can be replaced with custom buttons. So that way you can have more logic associated with them. So you can check for certain things in the form before they're able to click on that button. So for now, we'll go with the standard. So what we are expecting is 2 tasks for our request number 3. Let's check the accounting view. So they are seeing the basic data in view only mode. They can provide accounting details, and let's say we provide some data here and continue. The MRP folk can provide their stuff and continue. And the master data person will be able to view and change everything and play with this multiple times, validate if something is wrong. They can also reject it. In our flow, a rejection will cause it to basically notify this person and end, right? But you can have what's called a resubmit task or reject to specific teams, right? That all can be built in. So let's go ahead, create this material and approve. All right, that brings us to the end. We have been able to successfully make a basic flow, right? We were able to do a lot of these steps, and I know I did a few of them really fast, so please do watch the recording and try it out, pause and try it out. So we were able to import 3 scripts, create all of these different elements in the form, and run a simple end-to-end workflow for a material request process.
In case you have any further questions, please feel free to reach out to us. We'll be happy to answer. And you can contact us on the given contacts as well. Okay. Thanks everyone for joining, and apologies for not completing it on time. But yeah, I believe this is very useful for you, and we'll be sending the recording as well. Okay.
Yeah, thanks everyone for your time. And as promised, we'll include the solution file on the community as well as with the recording and the Q&A document, so you can have that. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.